Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Muffed Punt podcast. My name is Brandon, and I am joined by Paul and by Ralph. What's up, gentlemen? How are we doing this week?
Good evening. Good.
Man, the weather is crazy out here. We had snow yesterday. It was 80 degrees last week. It's going to be 75 in 2 days. Dude, 2020 is even messing with nature at this point. Like, no one knows what's going on. I just need this year to end. So But let's just get through this podcast, and we'll take it an hour at a time. That's how I'm going to do it the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the bright spots of 2020 has been that we've had consistent episodes with the podcast. Don't you guys think?
Yeah, because we don't have anything else to do. It's great.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to start off the same as we did last week with the game of the week. Our pick for this week is the Titans versus the Houston Texans. The Titans winning in overtime 42-36 over the Titans. With their backs against the wall once again after the second half collapse, the Tennessee Titans were able to battle back and earn a huge overtime win over the Houston Texans on Sunday, 42-36. The Titans looked to be cruising after staking themselves to a 21-10 lead going into halftime, but the Texans quickly erased their lead and exploded for 26 points in the final two quarters. Houston held a 36-29 lead with under 2 minutes left to play. However, Ryan Tannehill once again worked his magic and drove the Titans 76 yards, setting up a beautiful pass to A.J. Brown, who made an equally impressive catch to tie the game at 36. From there, the Titans would receive the ball first. Tannehill would connect with Derrick Henry, who had over 260 total yards and 2 scores in the game, for a 53-yard completion that eventually set up the Titans for a game-winning score on a direct snap to Henry just plays later. One of the keys that I thought to this game that I wanted to mention to you guys, the Titans were 4 for 6 in the red zone, while the Texans converted all 4 of their trips into touchdowns. The Titans averaged 8.6 yards per play. The Titans totaled 601 yards of total offense, a franchise record, and the Texans were 7 for 14 on third downs and 3 for 3 on fourth downs. Derrick Henry, most impressive stats, ran for 212 yards, averaged a season-high 9.6 yards per carry. He had 2 plays of 50-plus yards, one of which was a 94-yard touchdown run. Good golly, Miss Molly. Tell me, Ralph, what did you think of the game?
I think Derrick Henry is the absolute number one key to their success. And I don't mean just running the football. You mentioned the stat that I kind of wanted to talk about here is 601 total yards. I mean, that's insane. 601 total yards in a game between two teams is good. You know, that's a pretty exciting football game in my mind. You know, like you're thinking back and forth, blah, blah, blah. But 601 yards for one team is just quite impressive. And Tannehill, I mean, he was, 30 of 41, 364 yards, 4 touchdowns, an interception, just really playing well. But like I said, Derrick Henry's the key to them. He sets up the play action pass. He sucks those defenders up, on the play action, which gives Tannehill, like an open field, so to say, or more open than it would be to get the ball downfield to guys, like Brown and Fursker. Is that how you pronounce that guy's name? What a game he had.
We'll go with that.
Yeah. But man, in an age where quarterbacks are the penultimate and the just, they're the big money guys. They're the stars of the league. And to have Derrick Henry be this old school, just power running, and not just power. I mean, did you see the breakaway speed he had on that 94-yard run?
So
he
impressive.
left those guys in the dust, and it's just really impressive to watch. As much as I, love the Eagles and root for the Eagles, it's hard not to root for guys like Henry. Paul, there was one part of that game that really jumped out to me, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it, is time of possession. Listen to this time of possession. 31 minutes and 40 seconds Houston had the ball versus 31 minutes and 50 seconds that Tennessee had the ball. I mean, for an even time of possession game, that kind of tells the story about how close that game was. But it was a fun one to watch. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. The first thing that jumped out at me was Derrick Henry's breakaway speed on that 94-yard run. I'm not going to lie, I thought he was going to get caught. I've watched him play, and you always think of everyone who's that powerful as not having that kind of speed. And I don't remember a lot of those type of runs when he played at Alabama. And I watch a lot of Alabama games because Alabama's the NFL junior. I mean, at what point are the Jets going to get demoted to college and the Alabama Crimson Tide are going to become an NFL team at this point? But yeah, I could not believe that time of possession. Insane that it was, 50-50. I don't understand how Tennessee blew the game. Not the game, but when they're up 21-10 and the way that they started out the second half, I'm thinking the game's over. And then here comes Deshaun Watson. How bad of a coach was Bill O'Brien? Can we start with that? How terrible was Bill O'Brien? Because Deshaun Watson, as a losing quarterback, his QBR was 93.1. 9.1 yards per toss, 4 touchdowns. I mean, come on. Those numbers are incredible by themselves. And then I just don't think that they're as talented as Tennessee. And who thought 3 years ago, who thought talent in Tennessee were going to be on the same page? And they had Marcus Mariota, who looked like, I don't know, Josh Darnold has this year. And it's nuts. But Tennessee's coming together, not coming together. They're doing real well, 5-0. Their play action pass is fantastic. I mean, you can really put them right up there with anybody in the league, and I don't think there's anybody that's better. Ryan Tannehill, if you look at it, it was before last night, but if you look at his last 14 games, so since he had began starting for Tennessee, he has essentially the exact same stats as Patrick Mahomes, but he's responsible for more touchdowns. That's some pretty good company to have there. I didn't like Romeo Crennel's decision to go for 2 right there. At that point, to me, you go for the extra point, you're up 8, and then you make Tennessee have to score on back-to-back plays. So I would have kicked the field goal, and I'm usually the one who's all about going for a little extra, being aggressive, but I think that was the wrong call. But yeah, it was a great game to watch. Very, very fun.
That to me was something that I'm glad that you mentioned, because that to me was like the game with the Vikings game, because if they had kicked the field goal, I believe they would have been up by 8, and then the other team would have had to go down the field to score and go for 2 to tie it up. And that's to me why I agree in that situation. I would have done, a very similar thing. One of the things that we also didn't mention is Vrabel had another one of those Belichickian plays towards the end of the game where they needed to stop the clock, and he purposely threw an extra guy on the field so that they would get a penalty for too many men on the field, and so it would stop the clock. And that is what allowed them to go down and get that final drive. They scored with like 4 seconds left on the clock. I had to laugh to myself because I'm like, man, I wonder how many of these things that he's kept on this like secret notepad to himself of all the cheat codes he got from Bill Belichick over the years.
And okay, so let's touch on that real quick. Do you think that he learned it from Bill Belichick, like Bill Belichick talked about it, or do you think he just watched Bill Belichick and took it that way?
My guess would be the latter.
I'd have to agree. I don't think that Bill Belichick tells anybody anything, because none of his former assistant coaches have been any good. They're all terrible. And then you get a former player and he's just tearing it up with a team who, just plays just like Mike Vrabel did in his career, where he wasn't the biggest, wasn't the fastest, but damn, did he have heart. And I loved watching Mike Vrabel play. I don't think that Bill Belichick tells even his closest confidants anything. I think that's why Josh McDaniels took the job, then backed out of the job a couple of years ago, because he's like, wait, I'm not good at this. I'll just stay here where I'm doing something. But yeah, I thought that it was that was genius to get that 12-man call.
But did either of you hear the post-game press conference that Vrabel did? And one of the reporters asks him directly, says, "Hey, on that play where you got the 12 men penalty. Was that a direct attempt to stop the clock? And Vrabel just goes like this. He goes, well, we've got to do a better job of penalties, and we've got to make sure that we're, not taking those penalties late in games. And so he's real coy about it. And then,
dude, no, hold on. The best part of the whole thing is the guy that Vrabel threw out on the field had no clue what the hell Vrabel was trying to do. And then after they called the penalty, Vrabel faked that he was pissed off.
Yes. Well, not only that, but did you listen to, if you were listening to the game, Rich Gannon was doing the commentary, and he like lambasted Vrabel. He's like, you can't take penalties like that this late in the game. It's it's just a mental error on their part. They can't take these kind of penalties, and then come to find out it was done on purpose because, like you said, I mean, he saved 40 seconds at least by doing that, and just a Belichickian a move. And just watching him coach, is his team not the living embodiment of him and the player he was? I just really, as much as I don't like him, because I'll never forget he caught a touchdown in the Super Bowl in 2004 against the Eagles. Mm-hmm. I know it's all everything goes back to the Eagles for me, but having him catch that touchdown against us in the Super Bowl, so that was pretty much the score difference. If they stop that, then who knows, we might have 2 rings. I don't know, but him as a player, you gotta love him. You got to respect him anyway, and him as a coach, he continues that same thought and philosophy as a coach. So a lot of respect there. He's a great coach.
Part 1, Paul, you're wrong, because we had a broke TO and we still almost won that game. Number 2.
Oh, really? Okay. So how'd the game end?
24-21.
Oh, okay. So you lost.
Yeah, but
so stop talking.
Uh-huh. So the second point that I was going to make is Josh McDaniels in Denver, when you're talking about the Belichick's assistant coaches, because all intents and purposes, all I've ever heard coming out of Denver was that they absolutely hated him. And now you hear a lot about the players coming out of Detroit with Matt Patricia, and everything seems to be pretty much right along the same lines. We hear a lot about the previous coach in Detroit being very much a player's coach, and then now trying to kind of flip the script on that. We've always kind of heard about that a lot with kind of Andy Reid as well, being like a pretty big players coach kind of guy. You always heard the Eagles didn't really have like certain things that they did with him that they let kind of guys get away with that maybe other teams wouldn't have. So right. I don't really know with that how much you can read into that, but I do very much agree that I feel like these guys didn't learn a whole lot from Belichick and instead try to embody his overall persona of like who he is as a person, because that's what was communicated to them so right to their face. So I 100% agree with Paul's point there that I feel like the actual semantics of the game, what the actual lessons of the game, unless you learn them from watching him do it, you're not going to learn it.
I completely appreciate that and agree with it. I will say that Belichick, they're all trying to be Belichick with how they come off. But if you remember, I mean, we're not that far away from Belichick never being Belichick. Belichick failed in Cleveland, didn't do much of anything there. Then for like 14 hours, he was the coach of the New York Jets, and then backs out of that.
Dodged the bullet there.
Yeah, right? And then he ends up going to the Patriots and getting in the perfect situation. I guess you can take a couple things from that. Is some of these guys on their first stop, that might not be the right fit for them, because the players now compared to the players in the 80s and 90s, they have more freedom. They're just a lot of different mentalities that they have. And a lot of them have big personalities. And I mean, how many people have we watched go to New England with big personalities turn out to not have so big of personalities while they're there, just because they want to win? And then let's look at Wes Welker, who he kept up his personality while he was there, and they end up letting him go. So then he goes to the Broncos and ends up having like 7 concussions in 12 games there. But I just think that you have to have the right group of people that are willing to to let themselves be pushed around the way that Belichick pushes everyone around. And I think that's something that is very hard to get people to get on board with in this day and age. Just my personal opinion.
But I think Vrabel takes some of those cues from Belichick, along with a mix of maybe being a little bit more of a player's coach. Because I think he, being a player himself and playing not only for Belichick, but coaching with him, and then leaving the Patriots to go with Bill O'Brien and another, Belichick disciple, if you will. But, I think he's seen pretty much all sides of him as a coach to him, and then a co-worker, if you will, or somebody that's also coaching, working for him as a head coach. And I think he's kind of taken a little bit of everything and kind of picked some good and stayed away from the bad, and kind of got a little bit of this, a little from column A, a little from column B, and you mix it together and you get kind of a good mix of a player's coach, yet have that I hate to say it again, but that Belichickian way of just, he knows that rule book in and out. And that's the reason why he was able to use it to his advantage. Now, the other thing is, this is not only the first time that he's done this. This is second time. And the last time he did it was against Bill Belichick. And it was amazing to watch that. And to use it against Belichick was amazing. But since he's used it, what do you guys think they're going to do? I mean, competition committee's got to step in here and say, no, we can't do that. Are they going to change the rules, or are they going to make, and then if they do, how are they going to change the rules? How are you going to know that the coach is intentionally sending a 12th man on the field? Are you going to know the intent?
I think this is something where it's a lot like injury timeouts in the last 2 minutes. You can't take away the rule because you have no clue on intent, and you never will. Let's take a look at people getting injured in the last 2 minutes of a half or the game. And there's obviously people who would go through and do it, so you get that little bit of an edge, that stoppage of play and everything, the way that it happens in college sometimes. But yeah, then let's take a look at it. I can't remember who it was, but last week someone got laid out cold and ended up getting taken off in a stretcher inside of 2 minutes. Team still got charged a timeout because, that's the rule. So I think it's really up to the other coaches to learn the rule book and use it to your advantage the way that these two are. If you're not in the know about every single rule in that book, it's really on you. And I have no sympathy for that at all.
Agreed there. That's for sure. So the next game on the list is going to be my pick for the week, which was the Eagles versus the Ravens. Ravens edging out the Eagles 30-28. The Ravens defense delivered a dominant performance early, but the team was able to hold off the Eagles thanks to the legs of Lamar Jackson. Jackson had his first 100-yard game this season, including a 37-yard touchdown run that put up Baltimore 24-6 with 4 minutes and 35 seconds left in the third quarter, which ended up being too large a deficit for Philadelphia to overcome. Jackson sealed the win with a 21-yard run in the final minute to get the first down the Ravens needed and prevent the Eagles from getting the ball back. The Ravens only ran Jackson 8 times, but it was enough to get the win. After another slow start for the Eagles, it cost them on this one, not getting a first down until 5:32 in the second quarter on a Jalen Hurts 20-yard run. Hurts was the only sign of life early in the game for the Eagles offense, which started with 5 3-and-outs, 16 plays that resulted in -7 yards, and a fumble by Carson Wentz that gave the Ravens excellent field position deep in the Philadelphia territory. The Eagles averaged 10.8 yards per carry and had 371 yards and 28 points in the final 25 minutes and 32 seconds. But that wasn't enough to catch Baltimore. They have to end up starting these games faster. So, a couple quick points before I pass it off. My big things for this game is, 1, injuries. Listen to this. Going into that game, Miles Sanders is out. Deshaun Jackson's out. Alshon Jeffrey's out. Jalen Reagor's out. Zach Ertz is out. Dallas Goedert's out. Andre Dillard's out. Jason Peters is out. Isaac Salomalu's out. Brandon Brooks is out. Matt Pryor's out. Lane Johnson's out. Jack Driscoll's out. I think in total there was 17 guys that were injured. Carson Wentz was under duress on 47% of his dropbacks on Sunday. His third straight game where he was under pressure on at least 40% of his dropbacks. He is the first Eagles quarterback to be under that much pressure in 3 straight games since ESPN began tracking duress in 2009. So last thing that I'll point into here for me is, we kind of gone back and forth on the show about, is Jim Schwartz to blame a bit? Is it just injuries? Is it scheme? What is one of the big problems with this? And heading into week 6, Philly's defense had the 3rd worst average starting field position in the league. That was again an issue, as we talked about throughout the game. Baltimore took over at the Eagles' 28-yard line, scored after Wentz fumbled the ball. Baltimore took over again at the Eagles' 30-yard line and scored 3 points after Fulgham dropped Wentz's 4th and 5th. So it's just a lot of things that I feel like has just been adding up for them, continued for injuries. I don't remember another time in our history, maybe Ralph can, as far as the Eagles go, that we had 3 back-to-back years of just decimation from injuries. And I just thought those were some interesting things to point out about the game. I'm going to pass it to Ralph.
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on the injuries. I mean, yeah, it's hard to win games when you're playing with practice squad players. Now, is that an excuse? No, it's not an excuse because, as everybody says, next man up, next man up, next man up. But when you're playing with all of those guys, I mean, I like to, you could sit down and say how many NFL games between those players are currently sidelined. So how many games versus their replacement, do they have? So it's never an excuse, and that's what the coaches will say. That's what the players will say, but that's what they have to say. But you can't not ignore the fact that without those injuries and with a full healthy roster, maybe something's different. If Deshaun Jackson's healthy, if Alshon's healthy, are we, not having explosive plays down the field like we are right now? I mean, there's just, as you said, there's so much that goes into it. But for me, Carson Wentz he's just under duress on every play. He's bound to get hurt again. He's got a paper thin line in front of him. And they're just getting manhandled up front, and that's where you win games. You win them in the trenches, and they're losing them right now. And I will say that watching that game towards the end, anyway, seeing that they never quit, and for a team of nobodies, or at least on the replacement side, for a team of nobodies, they really showed some heart to even get it to be a 2-point conversion away from tying it, but I will say, if they did tie it, there's no way in hell that Lamar Jackson does not march them down the field far enough to kick at least a field goal from Tucker. So I feel like either way we were losing that game, whether it was missing the 2-point conversion or an inevitable Justin Tucker field goal. But from a perspective of, hey, they're showing heart and, hey, they're showing some life, I like what I saw. I just wish I got 60 minutes of it. Paul?
So what do they always say the biggest ability is in the NFL?
Heart.
Availability. As far as everyone going down, I think you could argue that the 49ers have as many, if not more, costly injuries.
Hey, they beat them.
Who, the 49ers or?
No, the Eagles beat the 49ers.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But the 49ers also just beat the Rams, who look like a contender for the Super Bowl this year. And I think that's kind of where you got to take a look is, I mean, we kind of sit here spinning our wheels saying the same things every week about the Eagles. And at this point, they're 1-4-1. They're a half game out of first place in their division.
That's the dumbest. That is the craziest statistic out there right now, is that they are 1-4-1 and a half game out of first place. How ridiculous is the NFC East right now? They're trash.
Yes. And so, I mean, let's face it, you've got a franchise quarterback, you're paying that much money. You're not going to get rid of Carson Wentz without giving someone else a chance to build him up. And maybe this is the time because you're 1-4-1, and even though you're only a half game out of first, you've got a coach who isn't doing much of anything right now, and the GM who, again, we just spend weeks and weeks saying he doesn't know how to make proper acquisitions. I mean, let's go back to the Texans Titans real quick. The Texans traded away their best player, in return got David Johnson, who has done. Yep, that's about it. And I mean, if you lose your best players all the time and don't get anything in return, and I mean, let's face it, Alshon Jeffries has been injured for years, and it just the same way that Randall Cobb was his last couple of years with the Packers. I mean, he played in less games than he sat on the sidelines for. So, I mean, maybe it's time to get someone who understands how to put a team together. So, I mean, the game was the game. Carson Wentz, 21 for 40, 213 yards, and he had the better passing day. So I think the Ravens are vulnerable. Yeah, I don't think either way the Eagles were going to win that game, because has anybody ever been more of a video game quarterback that likes to run and throw than Lamar? I mean, let's face it, video game numbers, sure, passing statistics, you're going to put Mahomes up, but I mean, think about all those games you used to play as a kid where you wanted to just run your quarterback and you couldn't. Now right. You can with him. So I think that I mean, there's no way that the Ravens were going to lose that game. But I just think that it's time for a rebuild top to bottom, and try to free up some rosters. I don't know, maybe you guys need to hold another tryout for like the city and see if anybody can make the roster as a wide receiver the same way that Vince Papale did back in the day. Because at this point, you could tell me any two names that you want to put together and say that they're a wide receiver for the Eagles, and I believe it, because I don't know who the wide receivers are right now with as many as they have injured. So.
Hey, Brandon, the next thing he's going to say is that, we threw snowballs at Santa Claus and we threw batteries at J.D. Drew. And, the next, that's all the cliche stuff about Philly we can start throwing out there, right? Vince Papale. Next thing you know, Sylvester Stallone will be suiting up for us. Come on.
Hey, I didn't say to re-sign Vince Papale. I said to hold an open tryout, right? Because let's face it, at this point, Des Bryant isn't doing anything. He could probably run some routes better than some of the guys that y'all have. And then let's just take another one. Let's take HaHa Clinton Dix, who is a free agent safety right now. Let's throw him in the slot and see what he can do, because I don't think that you have much to lose at this point. So let's hold some tryouts.
I wouldn't mind having him at safety, but I do understand what your point is there for sure. I got a lot out of this game as far as just, I felt the same going into last week as I did this week, that we were more than likely not going to win the game. I think I put in our chat, I posted the injuries pregame, and I said I'll be surprised if the Eagles don't get murdered on this game. And they actually came back and tied the game. So, and then that was after getting off to an atrocious start. Maybe it's just because I've been an Eagles fan my whole life. It's really hard for me to get super down on the Birds because they've not been super up in my book pretty much at any point in my life. But I really feel like, to me, that I was happy with what I saw. After you win a Super Bowl, and especially being your first Super Bowl, and maybe I'm just weird with this, I'm okay with the slump that comes thereafter. Like, we were talking about the World Series before, and a lot of teams end up having a slump after they win any kind of championship, especially in football, because you always get that really tough schedule the year after as well, is that, it's hard to have those expectations of going back to back. Like we talked about the Chiefs doing that this year, and I really don't know if they're going to be able to pull it off, but to me, they're still the odds-on favorite to do it. But we were talking about the power rankings last week, which we're not going to do this week, but to me, the Ravens would take a huge hit in the power rankings for this week because of the fact that they let the Birds back into that game. Like, if you let that offense back into that game, what are you going to let a competent offense do? So I don't know. Those are my basic thoughts.
I have to disagree with that, because I think that sometimes you get stuck with playing the level of the talent that you're playing against. And that to me is a game that a lesser team would have lost because they let them back in. So I think that that's a bit of an overreaction, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I feel like with them having so few weapons on that offense, especially this last week, for them to be able to do basically any sort of semblance of pulling things together. I mean, they were down and out of that game. I did not really expect them to make a game of it, and for them to come back the way that they did in the third, I was definitely happy, to see Wentz lead them back down with almost no weapons. Think about, this is something I heard on Undisputed, and I don't know what you guys would think about this, but I think the quote was, if you took the offense from Dallas and you gave that to Carson Wentz, what would be the possibilities in which that he could do with that? Like, I would have to imagine the sky's the limit with our defense and their offensive weapons for Carson. What do you guys think about that?
I think it'd be really impressive to see just how poorly he would do with actual weapons.
You can't ask a question like that to Paul. Come on.
I said you guys.
Well, he answered first.
Well, I mean, hey, that's you got to be quicker on the draw there, bud.
Well, I mean, I don't look. I mean, revisionist history or what ifs and everything. I mean, I don't want to get caught up in that because, what's he doing right now? I mean, everybody's a no name until they make a name for themselves, right? So is Fulgham going to be that guy that becomes the next Antonio Brown? Probably not. I'm realistic here, but I'm also kind of just spitballing here. But is Fulgham going to be anything more than just a temporary stopgap? I don't know, but you got to. For me, it's what's he doing right now, and he showed a lot in that game by making some plays down the stretch and everything, but I don't think you can compare or put Carson in a Cowboys uniform or put the Cowboys offense in an Eagles uniform and really be able to try to say if he would be successful or not. There's too much that goes into it. I mean, you'd like to dream that with guys like CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup and Ezekiel Elliott that they would be, they'd probably put a hell of a show on, but it's hard to really say one way or the other.
I think that's what the fun part of having a show like this is all about. The big what ifs. With Dallas, you have the embarrassment of riches, and then you still put up a game like they did last week. I don't think any of us saw that coming. I mean, I know Paul didn't. He picked them to win the game, but it was just crazy to me that was the outcome of that game. There was so many trap games this weekend. I kept trying to think about what was the trap game of the week, the game that nobody saw coming. But it was just, I think there was 3 or 4 games that probably could have fell that way this weekend.
Yeah, you guys lambasted me last week for picking Detroit, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. We gave you a lot of shit for that. I was surprised.
To be fair, we were right.
To be fair,
it's not our fault that it went the wrong way. It shouldn't have.
Well, next one on the list is we're going to go through Paul's pick, which is the Chiefs versus the Bills. The Chiefs defeated the Bills 26-17. One thing I wanted to mention really quick, because we didn't get a chance to get into it last week, and then I'll pass it to you, Paul. The Chiefs signing Le'Veon Bell. The contract with the Chiefs is going to pay him a base salary of $1 million. However, since the season is already 5 weeks old, Bell won't even be getting all of that because his contract will be prorated, which means he's only going to get to take home roughly about $690,000 in base salary. The good news for Bell is that he'll be able to earn some extra money on top of that, as his contract also includes $1 million in playing time and playoff incentives, which means his one-year deal could end up paying him a maximum of $1.69 million. Bell's deal with the Chiefs is slightly smaller than the one he originally signed back in March of 2019 when he landed a 4-year, $52.5 million contract with the Jets. Speaking of the Jets, they're actually going to be paying Bell some serious money this season, even though he's going to be playing for the Chiefs. So, Paul, take it away.
Yeah, that's the same situation that the Rams are in, where they're still paying Todd Gurley for, I think, this year and next year. I think Todd Gurley, he's on the hook for $12 million in dead money next year for the Rams. So it's nuts how some of those contracts work. And I'd just like to start out with this game and the rushing attack. Oh my gosh. And this is before you're adding in someone who has Le'Veon Bell's potential if he remembers how to play football. I mean, that's just going to be insane. I mean, Edwards-Helaire, he really, really must have taken it personal that they signed him because 26 for 161, that was insane. And I mean, up until the end of the game where they were handing it off, he had been averaging almost 8 yards a carry the entire game. It was really fun to watch the Chiefs win in a different way than just watch Patrick Mahomes throw the ball all over the place. It was really fun to watch Josh Allen look like the Josh Allen that I know and love. And
the non-MVP version.
Like I told you, Josh Allen is not going to be anything special. He's just not. And again, part of that is me being bitter over what happened to Tyrod there, and that's just the way it's going to be. But I do think that Josh Allen and Sam Darnold are completely overrated. Were you guys paying attention to all the talking heads before the season talking about how good Sam Darnold is and how he was going to be amazing and do such great things? And what, has he done anything? Like, has he played in any game so far this year, or like is he just sitting on the bench or something? Because he come on, the Jets are a joke. Talk about tanking for Trevor this year, and it's going to be fun to watch them take apart arguably the best quarterback prospect that we've seen coming out of college in 10 years ish.
Andrew Luck.
Yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit more later too, so don't go super into it.
Okay, so yeah, this game, it was fun. It was closer than I thought it was going to be. But Buffalo really committed to stopping the pass. And it's not like Mahomes had a bad game. He was still solid, 21 out of 26, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. It was just a good game, a big change of pace, and something that you don't see very often is a team winning in such a drastically different way than what they've done over the last couple of years. So I think that they have an embarrassment of riches right now. I know that it's kind of taboo now to take a running back in the first round, but I had heard that they listened to Patrick Mahomes and Mahomes wanted Edwards-Helaire out of LSU, and that might have been the smartest decision that he has made. They've just got so many stars all over the place. They're the anti-Philadelphia, the anti-Green Bay right now, where Green Bay doesn't have too many position players like that. And it was just a great game. What were your thoughts on it, Ralph?
Well, kind of touching base on this Le'Veon deal, how much do you think Edwards-Helaire being a rookie and possibly hitting that rookie wall has kind of played a role in them bringing Le'Veon in? I know, you hear a lot of rookies, and especially on, skill position rookies talk about hitting that rookie wall. And obviously we all know that the Chiefs are going to make a deep run into the playoffs, so at the very least make it to the playoffs. So, you're 16, 17 games in, and having a rookie be your bell cow for the entire season. I think it was just like an insurance kind of thing. And obviously with that deal, they got a club favorable deal by signing him to that prorated, salary. So I think that was a smart move on their part to bring him in. And not only that, but to bring him in so cheaply. But, like you said, Patrick Mahomes played a good game. He didn't hurt the team. He didn't win the game himself like he's been known to do. Edwards-Helaire, I mean, the guy is just, the 32nd overall pick in the first round, and they got a gem with him. And I just think that the combination of him and Mahomes for the next 5 to 10 years are going to be just perennial playoff team. I mean, they're stacked, and as you said, an embarrassment of riches. But by the time it's all said and done, is Andy Reid going to be one of the top? If is he ever going to surpass Belichick? I mean, with a
no.
You don't think so? You don't think with a Mahomes-led team for the next 10 years that Andy Reid would stay there and continue to get 10 to 12 wins a year?
No, I'm not saying that he won't, because I think that those are absolutely things that are going to happen. Because, I mean, unless someone, I don't know, kidnaps Andy Reid or kills Andy Reid, no one's keeping him from that sideline.
Well, diabetes might get him before anything else.
Dude, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, maybe a cheeseburger, the Hamburglar might come along and take him out. I don't know about that.
I really didn't want to go there, but I was thinking it as well. I mean, anything short of that, and Andy Reid is not coming off the field. But the fact that it took him so long to get a ring. And I mean, he lost in his one chance against Belichick. So, I mean, they're in the same conference now. They're not going to play another Super Bowl. Belichick, I think, has pretty well cemented himself that unless they win 4 in a row, maybe, and at that point, it can just be look at the team. I mean, you have. As we've said before, Mahomes is going to break every single record if he stays healthy. You have, your third best wide receiver is some team's top wide receiver. The speed that they have on the team is just ridiculous. So I think there's so much that you could say that this is just the perfect NFL offense for the time. And where, I mean, Andy Reid just won't surpass Belichick, and you have to keep this up for decades. And I mean, kind of touching on the whole diabetes and everything else thing, I don't think he has decades left in the NFL.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I very well may be, but off the top of my head, didn't Reid draft the vast majority of those guys? So yeah, if he put what Reid has done both on the field as far as coaching and in the draft room, which is tough because Belichick's had some very what round was Tom Brady picked in? So, I mean, obviously he's had some amazing pulls as well, but cumulatively, I really wonder if by the end of their careers, that's not going to be a fascinating argument.
Is Andy Reid their GM?
No.
He has, I would imagine he has a say in of that, because was he not the GM for Philly?
No, I don't think he was. He wasn't technically the GM. I mean, he had guys like Joe Banner and Howie Roseman, were also in the room with him, but I don't think they ever had an official general manager. I mean, let's go back, and if you're going to say that he was a good GM or made good draft picks, he's also drafted people like Danny Watkins.
Yeah, that's true. That's why I said, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. And I mean, Belichick, I think, is the only one who's ever been successful at both jobs. And I think that's just because he does not care about players at all. They are all just cogs in a machine to him.
Another thing I wanted to bring up, especially since Paul already started to touch on it, the Jets have a pretty interesting little thing that's come out over the last week. Podcast host Pat McAfee claims to have an inside source in the Jets organization that told him that the Jets are actively trying to lose football games to tank for Trevor Lawrence. Per McAfee, the Jets are legitimately full court press attempting to lose every football game. A text from an anonymous source told McAfee that the Jets are all out press for Trevor Lawrence at this point. McAfee clarifies that the information is not coming from a coach or a player, but rather a higher up in the Jets organization. So I'll let you go ahead and comment on that first, Paul.
If you're a player on that team, how much of a slap in the face is that to you? I mean, think about all the players that have left the Jets over the last couple of years. And Le'Veon wanted out. how much of a slap in the face is it to say, hey, we want you on our team because we don't think you can win? I mean, sure, it's nice to collect a paycheck, whatever they're paying, because, I mean, they still have to pay a certain amount of the salary cap. I think it's like 90% of the salary cap, 85, something like that. So, I mean, they're wasting a lot of money, but that's a slap in the face to the fans. I mean, maybe not as much this year because you don't have people paying for season tickets. But if you have fans coming and watching your games live, it's a slap in the face to the fans, to the players on the roster, to players of the league in general. Just to sit there and say that you're going to throw it like that, that's embarrassing. And you guys are Philly boys, so you watched it happen with the 76ers.
Look at what that got them.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. They've got 2 players right now out of like the 6 that they drafted. They can't play together. One of them can't shoot, and he plays point guard. The other one, he can't be the best player on your team. Markelle Fultz is having a better career now than he's in Orlando. He drafted Jahlil Okafor, a couple other people. So, I mean, draft picks are not guaranteed to hit. Now, do I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be a hit? Obviously, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be a hit. But if you have Trevor Lawrence as your quarterback and you don't have a single offensive lineman to protect him or a single position player that understands football past high school, then, I mean, what are you doing? So I think that it's a terrible, terrible thing for so many reasons. Ralph?
Well, we don't have to go far.
Can I interject really quick?
Sure.
No. Ralph?
I was going to edit that out, and now I don't know if I want to. So one of the things, and I could be wrong on this, but to my understanding, the owner of the Jets is not with the team right now. He has a job that causes him to be overseas, to my understanding, and his brother is essentially running the franchise while he's gone. So at any point in time, from my understanding, the owner could come home and be like, you guys are an embarrassment, and we're going to essentially clear house at this point. I know Joe Douglas has a 6-year contract, but I don't even know how safe he would be if the owner actually came back. So I just wanted to throw that in there before Ralph commented, because that could really throw a whole wrench in everything going on with the Jets right now.
Yeah, so, kind of what I was going to get to is, you don't have to go very far in history to kind of hit the same situation. I mean, Miami last year traded Minkah Fitzpatrick, a couple other guys, and it seemed like, for all intents and purposes, they were tanking for Tua. And it worked. I mean, they got Tua, and, so we'll see how that's going to go now that he's going to be the starter moving forward. But, I remember last year the narrative was, these players are angry that the team is, intentionally losing games so that they can go after Tua. And then you look at them this year and you see, glimpses of, that defense is, I'm almost willing to say that defense is, a legit, scary kind of defense. They've played really well the last couple of weeks. So, and it's not just against the Jets. They blanked them this weekend, but they've got a nice little defense going there. And Fitzpatrick has gotten them to 500, but we'll see what Tua does for him. But you don't have to go very far in history to hear and witness the same thing that the Jets are doing now to tank for Lawrence. So we'll see what happens. Nobody's guaranteed to be a stud, but obviously, like Paul said, I mean, chances are that Trevor Lawrence is going to be that guy.
Did you want to make a final comment on that, Paul, before I wrapped up?
No, I think Ralph pretty well tied it together.
Cool.
And you interrupting me when I said no. So,
So I think that'll move us brilliantly on to Ralph's game. Ralph's pick of the week is the Dolphins versus the Jets. Not much of a game, really, all things considered. 24-0, the Dolphins defeated the Jets. I didn't really know where you'd want to go with this one, Ralph, so I figured I'd just let you take it away.
Well, I guess what I really wanted to touch on with this is, with my recaps, I'm not really going to give you much on the, the ins and outs and the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of the games. I just like to talk about things that I pick up on and little talking points here and there that I'll bounce off of you guys as we kind of go through this. But in watching that game, like I was saying earlier, one of the things that stuck out to me was Miami's defense. I mean, listen to this 7-drive sequence for the Jets in the first half. 3 plays, 3 yards, punt. 3 plays, 5 yards, punt. 10 plays for 45 yards, punt. 3 plays for -4 yards. 3 plays, 4 yards, interception. 3 plays, 4 yards, punt. 3 plays, 8 yards, punt. That's 6 punts and 1 interception, and for a grand total of less than 60 yards, or right around 60 yards and a half. That's I mean, you can't get much better than that as a defense. They sacked Flacco 3 times. They hit him way more than that. They had 7 tackles for loss. I mean, this is a fun defense to watch. Agba, I don't really know how to pronounce his name, but Agba with 2 sacks, 10 quarterback pressures. I mean, that to me, I'm old school Philly. I love the old school Philly defenses of the late 90s and in the early 2000s, and watching them from a defensive standpoint was just fun to watch. Other things that stuck out to me during the game were Flacco, again, he was hit. One question I wanted to ask you guys is, with Flacco, do you guys think this is his last stop? Do you think he retires?
I think that he stays as long as he can. Did you know that Matt Schaub is still in the league? Like, I don't remember the last time he started a game. The last time he started any games that mattered, he threw 4 games in a row with a pick six, 5 games in a row with a pick six. If I'm a quarterback in that league with what backup quarterbacks are making right now, I hold on with every fiber of my being to that 7-figure salary. So I think that Joe Flacco will keep going just as long as anybody will pay him.
So that kind of brings me to one of the other things that really piqued my interest about this game is, Fitzpatrick. They're going to bench Fitzpatrick for Tua. Which, is it the right time? Who knows? I mean, I was listening to NFL Network this weekend. They were talking to Kurt Warner, and Warner brought up when he was benched after 9 games with the Giants and in favor of Eli Manning. Obviously, we know how all that worked out. Eli goes on to win 2 Super Bowls, retires, as a Giants Hall of Fame player, maybe even a Hall of Fame player for the NFL. That's debatable, in my opinion. But it brings me to one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys too is quarterbacks that kind of stuck around or played for multiple teams or just a perennial backup that just kind of raked the NFL over the coals for money. And listen to some of the names that I just kind of jotted down as I was thinking about this.
Chase Daniel. Gus Frerotte is on this list.
Who?
Gus Frerotte. I hope he's on this list.
I did not have Gus, but that's a good one. Chase Daniel, I think, is one of those guys that he's a perennial backup. I mean, he's a Ryan Fitzpatrick kind of guy, but Chase Daniel barely sees the field, if at all. I mean, the only time I've ever seen Chase Daniel play, I think he might have gotten a game or 2 in with the Bears. But guys like Osweiler, I mean, he signed that $37 million contract and just did nothing with it. Obviously, Fitzpatrick, like we talked about. Matt Schaub was on my list, so it's funny that you mentioned him, that he's still in the league. Which side here, who's he playing for now?
I can't remember. I just remember seeing him in a uniform and someone calling his name.
Is he with the Texans?
I thought it was the Texans.
Is it the Texans?
I think he might be back with them. Well, we'll have to look that up, but I think he might be back with them. But, I just thought it would be fun to kind of see who kind of rings a bell for you guys as far as quarterbacks that kind of stayed too long or were journeymen that just really never saw the field, but just, for whatever reason, because, there's only so many people that play the position. So the drop off in talent level, I mean, there's only maybe 2 or 3 elite level quarterbacks, and then the rest are just, kind of mid-level, and then you fall off from there. But Brandon, is there any quarterbacks kind of like that jump out to you?
Matt Schaub is a Falcon, by the way.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. He's a Falcon. If I remember correctly, didn't Gus Frerotte make $18 million for 4 years back in the day.
Something like that. And that's when quarterback contracts weren't what they are now. So.
Yeah.
Gus Frerotte is also the guy that scored a touchdown and then rammed his head into a concrete wall and injured himself.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
That was amazing.
So, these are the things that I like to think about when I'm watching games. Not to say that this game was a game of the week kind of thing, or that it had any kind of entertainment value other than the defense for Miami. But obviously some big things have come out of this game, like Tua and the start of the Tua, timeline here with Miami. And it'll be interesting to see what this guy does. A little tidbit I heard was he's the first left-handed quarterback in the league for a while. I don't remember who the last one was. I think it might be
Kellen Moore.
Kellen
Moore. Yep. With the Cowboys.
So that was an interesting little tidbit. But for me, I mean, I think it's hard to bench Fitzpatrick, but I also understand why they're doing it because, that he's either going to be scoring 4 touchdowns and running 2 in, or he's going to be throwing 16 interceptions and, just losing the game for you. So he's one of those guys that is serviceable and could probably pull out a game or two if you needed him. But he's never been and never will be a long-term answer. But it's the start of the Tua era in Miami. And the other thing, which I'll get your opinion on, Paul, is Adam Gase and Greg Williams. There was a little tiff that came out this week where, kind of Greg Williams was throwing some shade at him in the media, and then Adam Gase comes back and says, just shut up and play. So is there some infighting there that's going to take place? And as Brandon said earlier with Joe Douglas there and signing the 6-year deal, I think you're more likely to see the whole coaching staff get replaced before Joe Douglas does.
Well, funny thing really quick before Paul goes is that apparently Gase had some say in picking Douglas, and that's part of the reason why he stuck around so long is because he essentially picked the GM. So apparently that's had some reason as to why he hasn't been fired yet, but go ahead, Paul.
Well, I'm just going to lead with I hate Greg Williams. I hate him with every fiber of my being. For the whole Bountygate thing, and like Brett Favre was one of my favorite players to watch growing up as a kid. And when you did what you did to him in that NFC Championship game, and like nothing got called against him, and I don't think that Greg Williams should be in the league anymore. Personally, that's just my opinion on it. And it's a very biased opinion, I will openly admit. I love that Greg Williams called out somebody, because what has Greg Williams done recently? Nothing? All right. Okay. So call out people as often as you want. I mean, I think at this point, everyone on the Jets staff is just trying to fight for a way to stay through to the regime change that they know has to be coming, and just stick around and keep their job, or at least get a job somewhere else after this. But I'm very interested in the Tua thing overall. Just very excited for him to see what he's going to do. If he's injury prone, or if he just got tackled off awkwardly a few times. I can talk, I swear. But I just remember almost a year ago thinking that this guy might not ever play in the NFL, because whenever I think broken hip, I think most fans that think broken hip think Bo Jackson, and that was really the end of his career. So I'm excited for him. One thing I thought was cool was after the game, he came out, sat on like the 15 or the 20-yard line and FaceTimed with his parents. Just excited to see him get on the field, see what he can do, and go from there.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool to see him FaceTime with his folks in that picture. I have to imagine that's probably a pretty surreal moment for him, going through everything he has with all the injuries and everything. So I'm happy. I hope he does big things for them. I know that they really did seemingly auction off a lot to get him. So, I mean, you always want to see it hopefully pan out in those particular situations. I really don't know. I haven't watched enough of Trevor Lawrence to know if I feel like he's going to be successful. I feel like any quarterback, if you just give them no line at all, it's going to be really hard for, like, they just have so many other pieces on that team that they're going to need to build, or like, you know, building from the inside out, that they're really going to have to do. So it's, I think for the Jets, I really don't know if we'll ever see them be good in our lifetime. My old neighbor in Florida used to be a Jets fan, and I just always felt so bad for the guy. I mean, growing up an Eagles fan and dealing with a lot of loss myself, it's always funny that you run into guys who are franchise fans of another franchise that you feel like have it even worse than you do. There's not too many in between, you know, few and far in between that you can say that about. But seeing him deal with his every week in, week out with the Jets just really showed me, you know, you got it pretty good as an Eagles fan comparatively with some of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about bad franchises. Back when I cared about baseball before Rob Manfred sold the sport out for everyone on the Astros, my first memory is at a Cubs game. I've been a Cubs fan literally as long as I can remember, and I never thought they were going to win a title. And I was fine with that because it's just what they do. They get close. They're the lovable losers. It's fine. And yeah, that's what happened. But then I will always admit I had a little tear in my eye when I saw Chris Bryant get that last out and throw it over to Rizzo. But now that baseball is dead to me until Rob Manfred gets, I don't know, whatever happens to him, that he ends up leaving the job. Yeah, I would say there's a special bond between fans of truly terrible teams.
Oh, I thought you were going to say there's a special bond between Rob Manfred and the Astros.
Oh, no, not at all. It's just that Robert Manfred enjoys being filleted, and the Astros like to fillet people. So,
living in Florida for a time and living in the Tampa area, I have always not been a fan of most of the Tampa franchises, because whenever you're somebody who gets moved into a different area and you're like the only representative for your team, for me, it almost makes me double down more rather than being like, oh yeah, from time to time I'll learn about the local team and maybe I'll wear a Lightning shirt somewhere to blend in or whatever. No, F that noise. Like, I want nothing to do with it. I remember going to college and I was like the only Flyers fan on the entire campus, and everybody else was Devils fans because it was in North Jersey. And it's like, whenever I've been in that situation in my life, I've always like doubled down on my fandom and went that much harder, instead of being like, oh, maybe I won't wear the Flyers jersey. Like, I went to Devils games in the Devils stadium in my Flyers gear repeatedly and never had any problems, but I was never scared to wear the gear.
No, I'm 100% right there with you. My next door neighbors are huge Hawkeye fans because my wife works for the university and like we live real close. And I've always been like when it comes to the Big Ten, it's always the Badgers. That's who I wanted to play for growing up. Obviously not good enough because there aren't many people good enough to play for the Big Ten. But yeah, like I always wanted to play for the Badgers. And then it was, I don't know, maybe 4 months after we bought the house, and then our neighbors invited us over. It was a Badgers Hawkeye game, and the Hawkeyes had just scored a touchdown, and the owner of the house is getting on my case for not giving them a high five because the Hawkeyes had just scored to take the lead. And so I put my hand up. He's like, yeah, that's right. And I was like, all right, this is the point that I hated the Hawkeyes. Like, there will not be a team in the Big Ten that I want to lose more often than the Hawkeyes because of you. So now that we've got stuff going on, I've got Badger masks that I wear all over town now. Like, I completely doubled down. So I love that you did that too.
Little did he know that high five has made him a mortal enemy.
Terry, if you listen to this, you did it yourself, and I don't care. I don't like you. Never will. Never will. You broke this before it could have started. Could have been something nice, but you broke it.
Totally his fault too. All right, so I want to get into, we have one last story I wanted to get into for football in general before we make our picks, and then I have one non-football related story I wanted to do before we wrap tonight. Last football story, Michael Thomas. So Michael Thomas was held out of Week 5 due to a disciplinary issue. The 27-year-old reportedly received a 1-game suspension following a fight with teammate C.J. Gardner-Johnson in practice on Saturday. Thomas was also said to be talking back to the coaches, including head coach Sean Payton. On Tuesday, Thomas broke out his silence for the first time by sending out a number of tweets, including one where he said, "Ain't trying to clear up no rumors." So there was 3 tweets. One said, "You ain't a snake, but they will make you." The other says, "Think what you want. I ain't trying to clear up no rumors." And then the last one said, "I was never healthy. I was just trying to help my team get a win and heal up during the bye. Had a setback, was so close, and I take my health serious. Now I'm a bad guy. Laugh out loud, bet." In quotes, Drew Brees said, "I've spoken with Mike Thomas." He told reporters following New Orleans' overtime win to the Chargers on Monday night, "Mike and I talk a lot, both in person and in the locker room through text messages. We're always communicating. And so at the end of the day, Mike is a big part of the team, and he is going to be a big part of the team moving forward. We had an incident, and Sean Payton addressed it, and many of the team leaders have spoken with Mike as well, and we're going to be all good." When asked if Thomas' suspension would last just 1 game, Sean Payton told reporters Monday night, "That is something that we will discuss, and we will let you know when the time is right." So when you see this, and we're not that far removed from AB and all of his antics that led him out of the NFL, what do you guys think about this? Are we going to have another situation now where we see another arguably top 5 wide receiver have his, we'll say again, arguably diva-ness take him out of the NFL? Or do you think this is something that was a mishandle? I know that, I think when I was watching Pat McAfee, they had said that like Michael Thomas, Sean Payton, and Drew Brees are all basically the exact same person. They just all kind of express themselves differently. Like they're that hyper competitive, always on the edge of being almost too competitive kind of person. And that's kind of why they've all gotten along up to this point, but maybe that chemistry just isn't working out. What do you think, Paul?
I think that athletes often get painted in the wrong light because when it comes to sports, the management and owners don't want the athletes to have the power. I think that if you go back and take a look at any lockout that has happened has been because players and owners won't agree on a collective bargaining agreement where every chance they get, the owners are taking every penny that they can from the players, especially in the NFL where contracts aren't guaranteed. I will always side with players getting their money. I think that when it comes to wide receivers, the best ones are always divas. I mean, Terrell Owens, Randy Moss, the only one, and I mean, I wasn't alive for his run with the 49ers in the 80s, but Jerry Rice is the only one I can think of that wasn't really a diva. He just lined up and played. That was great. So I think that the Saints are falling apart this year. I think that Drew Brees is starting to look old. I don't know why they signed Jameis when they have Taysom Hill, because I think that Jameis is awful. But I just think that this is just another case of ownership trying to paint an athlete in a bad light so that they can get the fan base on their side. And the fan base is like, "Hey, why are you doing this? And why are you doing this? You got to stop." But I think that it's just shades of gray.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
So you played football. I've played sports, but it was not contact sports. So when you play contact sports and you have 2 guys on the same team, and during a practice, a guy hauls off and punches another teammate in the face, how do you really come back from that at that point?
Is that what happened?
Yeah. From my understanding, the guy that they said that he had the fight with during practice, he punched him in the face. And then they said that he repeatedly, when they went to him to consult, to talk to him about it and be like, what happened? And he didn't want to talk to nobody. He didn't want to have any conversations with anyone. He didn't want to be coached about it. And then after the team kind of got after him, then he kind of came around, and then everything was fine after that. From my understanding, that's how it went.
Do you know how long they gave him in between when it happened and when they tried to talk to him?
I don't know specifically. I would, from how it was, the impression I got from it was that it was pretty quick thereafter, like immediately thereafter.
I think when it comes to NFL, you've got a lot of really big personalities, and I mean, in order to play in the NFL, you have to think that you're the best player on the field. So I think when you get something like that, and you have people who get riled up, I mean, when it comes to having a big flash of testosterone, it takes like a half hour for it to leave your system. So, I mean, you're going to be elevated and on edge just biologically for at least a half hour. So if you have something like that and everyone's trying to come at you after a half hour, they're not doing you any favors on it. I mean, at a certain point, yes, Michael Thomas has to be professional about it. But if he needs a little bit of time to calm down, I think you're kind of blowing it up. But I think that a lot of teams, if you look at preseason, especially this year, I don't know if you watched Hard Knocks, but there were players on the same team taking shots at each other. It's part of being competitive and being frustrated. So I think that Michael Thomas he's a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL, and he hasn't really been able to play much at all this year. So I think that there's a lot of frustration built up. The Saints don't look as good as everyone thought, so there's more frustration built up there. So I just think you have a situation coming to a head. I think that those things can be controlled. I think if the players have made up by now, then you're good. If not, then I mean you might have to move on from one of them. But I think when it comes to big things like that and playing in a contact sport, there's a lot of alpha personalities, and sometimes those aren't going to get along.
All right, so one of the things I wanted to do, just like we've been doing each and every week, is we're going to go through the predictions for this week, and then I have one more quick thing I want to tie up here. I know we had a little bit of a restriction on time this week, so I want to make sure we roll through as quick as possible. So, all right, gents, we've had our picks up until this point. We've been doing them pretty much every single week. I think we only had the 1 week that we didn't get to broadcast the show. We've been doing pretty great since the season started. Last week we had our picks. Ralph, for the last 2 weeks, man, you've been doing great. You went 10-4 last week. I myself went 9-5. Paul went 5-9. So overall, Ralph is currently in the lead, 29-14. I'm nipping at his heels at 28-15. And Paul is in the back, but I'll tell you what, man, it's one bad week if either one of us have, and you're going to be right back in it, currently sitting at 23-20. So let's start for our Week 7 picks. You guys ready?
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
All right. Thursday Night Football is back this week. We have the Eagles taking on the Giants. Man, oh man, this is going to be interesting to hear.
America loses again.
There has not been a Thursday Night Football that America has won yet, right, Paul? Hasn't America lost every Thursday night there's been a game?
Yeah, because it was, what was it, the Broncos? Or who was supposed to play last weekend, but it got pushed back to Monday?
Yeah, I was going to say that there was no Thursday night game last week, so America technically won that week, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they won, but I still think they kind of lost because I think last week would have been the first good game of the year. So I think we're back to this stuff. Thursday Night Football, it needs to die. I don't want to pick a team between these two. They both suck. I'll go with the Eagles.
I've thought about this one a lot, and I think that the Eagles have been playing decent enough football anyway to beat the Giants. So if they can kind of keep tabs and stay a little, somewhat even with the Ravens and a powerful football team, maybe they play down to their competition like we talked about earlier, but I'm going to take the Birds in this one.
If the Eagles team from like the last half hour of the game show up, then the Eagles are going to take that game. If not, then it's definitely going to be the Giants, but I'm going to go with the Eagles overall in this one. Next game up on the list we have is starting off on Sunday, is we were just talking about them, the Saints versus the Panthers. Who you got, Paul?
Oh, and this is tough. Michael Thomas plays. I think that they're going to win. But if not, then they're not that great. And I think it'd be fun to see Teddy win against his old team. But I got to go with the Saints on this one.
I'm going to go Saints as well. I think this game could be. I don't know what the line is on the game, but from a record perspective and a talent perspective and how these teams are playing right now, I think they're interchangeable. But I know there's no fans, but give me the home team.
Yeah, I think next year is going to be a lot different when we have to go through these because we're going to have to say who's home and away because hopefully by then there'll actually be fans back in the stadium and it'll make a difference. But I'm going to go with the Saints on that one as well.
Ain't happening. No fans ever again.
Next game on the list we have is possibly the battle of the bottom, which is the Jets versus the Bills. What do you guys think?
Bills.
I think after they have kind of non-officially announced they're going to try to lose every game, you kind of have to take the Bills, right?
I think that even if the Jets were trying, the Bills would win. I think the Bills are going to be. I think the Bills are going to be pissed after the last couple of weeks, and I think that Josh Allen has a big game in this one and looks like the MVP contender that you both think he is.
Well, next one on the list is the Battle of Ohio. We have the Cleveland Browns versus the Bengals. What do you guys think? Who's going to take it? Paul?
I'm going to go with the Bengals on this because, oh my gosh, dude, the Browns just look awful. They win, they look awful. They lose, they look awful. They play the Steelers, they look worse than awful. And I think that the Bengals are starting to do okay. I think Joe Burrow's getting used to the NFL a little bit. So I'm going to go for the upset with the Bengals.
It's almost like you're reading my notes here because that's pretty much my thoughts on the game, verbatim almost. I think the Browns are finally realizing that, oh, shit, we're the Browns. And the Bengals, like you said, Joe Burrow's getting a little comfortable there. So I'll ride the hot hand and say Joe Burrow's going to pull one out.
I think I'm going to go against you guys on this one. I think I'm going to take the Browns. I like their defense this year as really the main part of that team. One of the things I thought was funny is when Paul said what he said, how many times now have the Browns on third down had their wide receiver throw the ball instead of Baker Mayfield?
and how many times has the pass looked better than a Baker Mayfield throw?
Man, that Jarvis Landry throw, he put his entire body into that throw, man. It was impressive. I was like, wow, man, really talk about throwing he hopped up in the air and drove his whole body behind it. But I think I'm probably going to end up regretting that one, but I think I'm still going to go with Browns on that one. Next up on the list, we have Cowboys versus Washington. Paul?
I got to go with the Cowboys on this.
Oh, man. It's my gut says Cowboys, but at the same time, they haven't really shown me anything to be confident in. So maybe this is just a wish or wishful thinking, but I'm going to go with the football team from DC.
Did you guys see that there's a good chance that they're still going to be the Washington football team next year? Are you kidding me? You're going to go with that name on purpose twice. Come on.
I don't know. It is absolutely ridiculous. Do you really think it's because that guy has all those copyrights?
I think that's a weak excuse.
I think, I agree with that. But I think it's because they printed up all this new merchandise that they still have on their racks that they haven't sold. They just got to get rid of it before they change their name.
That's actually not that terrible of a thought, but I don't really know who the hell's buying Washington football team merchandise at this point.
Probably the same people that think that the Bills won 4 Super Bowls in a row in Africa.
That's true. Until you finished that sentence, I was like, where are you going with this?
I don't know if you guys know this or if any of the listeners do, but the team that loses the Super Bowl, they have to print everything up. So that stuff just gets donated and ends up in Africa somewhere. And that's legitimately where it goes.
Man, I think for me, this is the hardest game to pick for the week. I really don't. I'm like, this is that, or I don't really know who to pick because I feel like they both are awful, and it could really go either way. I wrote Giants, so I'm just going to say Giants, even though in my heart I still feel like the Redskins, the Washington football team could win.
You said Giants?
Giants?
What's that?
You said Giants?
Oh, Cowboys. I'm sorry. Yeah. So wait, yeah, man, my brain really chose the wrong word there. Thank you. Hold on.
Your brain just wouldn't let you say Cowboys.
That's exactly what it was, man. So yeah, I guess I'll choose Cowboys then.
Nah, it's adorable that you think Brandon has a brain. That's just adorable.
It's too many adult vitamins. That's the problem.
Sure, that's what it is.
Next game on the list we have is the Packers versus the Texans. What do you guys think? The Packers going to be able to find, like, both of these teams are coming off a loss. So who are we going to pick for this one?
I'm going to go with the Packers, probably because I'm a Packers fan, but also because David Johnson is terrible. The Packers can't stop the run that well. But I think if you can force Deshaun Watson to throw to subpar receivers, since their best player is no longer on their team, that's where that's going to end up.
I'm going Pack because I don't think they're losing 2 in a row.
I'm going to go Packers as well. Really quick, because I feel like it's a little bit more interesting. Can you surmise what happened in that game last week in a sentence, Paul?
They lost.
Like, it really seemed like Rodgers, after he threw those 2 interceptions, was just a totally different guy.
Well, the first one was his fault. The second one, if your receiver gets both his hands on it, that's on the receiver. So once that happened, and then the defense had to work with a short field. See, I think the Bucks did to the Packers what I was hoping the Packers were going to do to the Bucks, where they just got enough pressure on the quarterback. I mean, where were the Smith brothers? They were nowhere to be found. So I just hope that they can get a pass rush, because if you can't get a pass rush against Deshaun, he's either going to run all over you or he's going to throw all over you, and it's just going to be what happens.
It's amazing to me that the Bucks offensive line can go from headbutting guys one week to no penalties the next week. Like, I guess getting bitched out by Tom Brady on the sidelines actually had an effect.
See, and I'm beginning to think that it's Giselle, because Tom Brady does the bitching during the game, but after the game, Giselle's always the one who's on the wide receivers that drop the ball. I think that people are just scared of Giselle because she's Brazilian.
I think you're right, man. I think we missed something here. I think that's really where it's coming from.
Obviously.
The next one we have on the list is the Falcons versus the Lions. What do you guys think?
Ooh. Falcons.
Man,
Don't do it. Don't do it, Ralph. Your wife's going to kill you. Don't do it. Sorry, go ahead.
What? Take the Lions?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. I got lucky with that call last week. It was just one of those games where I thought it could be a trap game, but I don't think just like the Pack aren't going to lose 2 games in a row, the Lions aren't winning 2, so give me the Falcons.
All right. You're safe another night, not going to sleep on the couch. I'm going to take the Falcons as well, just because putting up 40 points last week, I feel like, is something. So hopefully they can continue to see how things roll into the next week. So,
and if Julio's healthy, obviously he had a nice game last weekend. I think that's going to play a role. And Dan Quinn's out, so he's not going to, maybe those big comeback losses aren't going to be a thing anymore. We'll see. But I trust them more now at the helm.
Next game on the list Next game we have on the list is the Steelers versus the Titans. Paul?
I'm gonna go with the Titans on this. I hope Jadeveon Clowney has Big Ben wear him like a hat. Someone needs to put that thing in its place, and I think that they're going to outcoach the Steelers. I think that they're better than the Steelers, and if Derrick Henry resembles anything like the Derrick Henry of last weekend, wow, it's going to be fun.
So I'm a big believer in be careful of following last week's plays, and a lot of times I get stuck in fantasy football chasing points, and so for me, I never want to go after a receiver like that Fursker guy in fantasy and say that he had 118 yards and a touchdown last week. Let me go pick him up. So I'm hesitant to pick the Titans this week for that reason, and for the just there's something that tells me that if there's any game that could be the game of the week for us this coming week, I think this is shaping up to be that. Just because you've got two powerhouse teams right now, two 5-win teams plus that are going to be going at it. So
no. You've got one powerhouse team and one quarterback that sold his soul to the devil. Let's be honest.
Well, I'm not going to dispute that, but from a purely football perspective, these two teams are they're shaping up to be the cream of their respective crop and their division, and it's going to be a good game either way. But my gut tells me to be scared of the Titans this weekend, so I'm going Steelers.
Paul, are you trying to say that Ben Roethlisberger finding Jesus is a fraud, is not real? I don't know.
Where'd he find him?
Right behind the couch with the 350.
Wasn't in that girl's bedroom, was it?
Oh.
No, it was in the Steelers front office after he had to make a public apology the second time.
I kid, of course.
Yes, I kid. So
I don't.
I think I'm going to take the Titans on that one as well. I'm with Paul in that I feel like this is going to be hopefully the game that you see the Steelers finally get their first loss of the season. First time we're having two 5-0 teams, I believe, go against each other this year. So I think it's got game of the week written all over it, but we'll have to see what happens. Next game up, we have the Seahawks versus the Cardinals. Seahawks, I believe, coming off the bye week, and the Cardinals had a pretty good game last week. What do you guys think, Paul?
I'm going to have to go with the Seahawks on this one. Kyler Murray was 9 of 24 for this last game, and I don't think that you can beat Russell Wilson if you're completing single-digit passes. I know that it was a one-off, and the rest of the season's been fine for him, but I think 2 weeks for Pete Carroll to game plan against a mediocre team is going to be more than enough here.
Yeah, I think Arizona's got a good young team there, but I just, for my money, I'm going Seahawks.
I am as well. I think them having 2 weeks to prepare is going to be plenty. Moving on, we have the Chiefs versus the Broncos. Paul?
Chiefs.
Yeah, same. I was going to say, do I even need to ask? Would that be one of the biggest upset games of the year if the Broncos pulled that off?
Yes.
Sorry, when we go that fast, I have to write them all down. All right, next one is the Chargers versus the Jaguars. Paul?
I love Anthony Lynn, and the Jaguars haven't been anything special. So I'm going to hope that Anthony Lynn, with 2 weeks off and declaring Justin Herbert the starter, is going to be enough. So I'm going to go with the Chargers on this one.
I'll take Chargers as well.
Yeah, I am as well. I don't really see Jags putting anything together this year. It's kind of a shame. I really was hoping Gardner Minshew would have that kind of like quirky factor to him, and maybe the team would kind of get behind him and do something. But man, I think the accumulation of them trading off the players of their defense has just really started to catch up to them.
Yeah.
Next on the list, we have the Patriots versus the 49ers. Paul?
Ooh. Then you got the Patriots coming off a bad loss. You got the Niners coming off a really good win. But I really want the 49ers to win, but I think I'm going to have to pick the Pats because I think that Bill Belichick is going to outcoach Shanahan in this one.
I don't think there's anything more I could say. I agree. I'll go Pats.
Man, I really going against you guys when you both pick the same person from time to time, and I kind of feel like this could be a spot for that to happen. Because I feel like with the Niners, they're getting a little bit more healthier every week that goes on, and George Kittle's getting a little bit more, in it every single week. It's tough.
Their two best defensive players are done for the season.
I'll say Pats just because I expect them to make less mistakes than the 49ers make at the end of the day.
Don't do that. Come on. Have some balls.
Next one on the list, speaking of, we have Tom Brady and the Bucs versus the Raiders. What do you guys think?
I think the Bucs are starting to really get their timing back. I think it's unfortunate that OJ Mayo is done for the season with his Achilles, but Gronk looked like the Gronk of old. So I'm going to take the Bucs.
Yeah, Bucs. After that game against Green Bay, if they continue to play like that, I'll take my chances with them versus the Raiders. I mean, the Raiders beat the Chiefs. Are they going to be riding high off of that? Raiders were on a bye this weekend, correct? So they're going to be coming off of a bye, but I don't think that matters. I think the Bucs are rolling right now. So give me the Bucs to win.
If I'm going to pick the Bucs, but if the Raiders beat them and they have a win over the Bucs and the Chiefs, does that change your thoughts on the Raiders this year?
No.
I think the Raiders are an underrated team, so I don't think it changes anything. I think the Raiders can hang with anybody.
All right, last game of the week, Monday night, Bears versus Rams. Paul?
Rams.
Bears versus Rams. Nikki 6. BDN. Man. Can Nick Foles keep this up, guys? Can he keep the Bears in the win column? I mean,
what do I have
waiting.
to say to make you pick the Bears?
I don't know. I went away from them last weekend when they played Carolina, and
I was the only one that picked the Bears on that one.
Yeah, I thought they were going to win that game, but I mean the Rams, they're a good team. They're not a great team, but they can play with anybody. I think they're kind of like the Raiders. I mean, they're going to stick with everybody, and they're going to have games where they play really well, and then they're going to have games where they're competitive and might lose just on a single play here or there. But this one to me is one of the toughest games I think of the week, and it's a Monday night game. I'll give me the Rams.
Man, I thought he almost talked himself into it. I was trying to. I'm going to go with the Rams as well, but honestly, if the Bears have any chance, their defense has got to come up huge. Like a couple takeaways, regardless of any kind of situation, is going to happen for them, because you have to figure with Aaron Donald and what did you say? BDN? I love it. Nick Foles is. I think it's going to be really tough for him because they have an okay offensive line. It's not the greatest offensive line, so I think it's going to be a lot of rush that's going to be in Nick Foles' face. So if they can find ways to work the spread and play action, then maybe he'll have a good chance. But I think the Bears are going to need a couple extra possessions in that game if they have any chance of winning. So I'm going to go with the Rams.
I think Aaron Donald was just tired last week because he spent so much time in the backfield against Washington. So I think that he'll be well rested and he'll have a nice big game against the Bears.
I think he's going to have extra, incentive. Whenever you have two guys at the same position or roughly the same position that are at the, arguably top of the cream of the crop of the league, I feel like they're going to play up, especially when they're playing each other. All right, so last story of the week. You guys ready? Don't get too excited. All right, last story of the week is I don't think we've ever talked about yet MMA on the show. Mixed martial arts. I, for myself, have always been a big fan. I haven't really watched it as much in recent years because they're essentially behind like two paywalls now, where you have to have a subscription to ESPN Plus, and you have to buy the pay-per-view, which is like $50 or $60. So it's just a little outside of my overall price range, considering how many pay-per-views they do every single year. But one of the things that has always been something that's been a big, we always have like the Chuck and Tito's. Ralph and I were talking about that before we started recording tonight. You have these rivalries that happen in mixed martial arts, and it's always a fun when you have the ones, especially where they have, trilogies or even more. It's a lot of fun with that in boxing as well. And one of those with mixed martial arts has been John Jones and Daniel Cormier. One of the things that's been interesting, I know you guys don't really have a whole lot of the backstory when it comes to MMA, but if you will, just essentially picture the bad boy of any sport versus the absolute guy that did everything he could, as far as I can tell, to do everything right. And even though the guy who did every single thing right still ended up coming out on the bad side of the trilogy, if you will. And especially the latter two fights, the last two fights, Daniel Cormier had moments of looking like he was going to win that fight, and then they ended up becoming resounding losses in the end. One of which he ended up breaking down into tears, and was probably, I think, one of the harder sports moments I've ever had to watch, because you literally just saw that guy just break down from, I can't even imagine what must go through his head thinking about how he did everything the right way and then watching another guy do all the wrong things, and then the other guy ends up still winning. But multiple time with John Jones DUIs. He's had, I believe, 3 or 4 DUI arrests. The guy has been stripped of his belt 3 separate occasions. So definitely things that have not gone well for him. But in the same respect, physically and natural talent-wise, he has been one of the most God-gifted athletes I have ever seen in combat sports. And the guy, if it wasn't for a disqualification that he had versus Matt Hamill a long time ago for a up and down elbow, I think the guy might have had a chance at running undefeated at one point. So it's definitely interesting to see. Now, one of the stories that's always gone through is that John Jones, with his several failed drug tests for a cornucopia of different substances over the years, including estrogen blockers and steroids that he once attributed to bad performance enhancing pills in the bedroom, shall we say. So one of the stories that came out more recently, or that came out a long time ago, that was always kind of like a conspiracy theory of MMA, was that when John Jones was supposed to get drug tested before the fight with Daniel Cormier, John Jones had actually hid from the actual drug testers, supposedly under the actual like canvas, the ring, if you will, that they had at the gym that he was at. And the people that were essentially helping him out, his teammates, kind of helped him get away from the guys who were supposed to be doing the random drug test. Now, for the longest time, this has been something that was not ever confirmed. And I don't know why, but all of a sudden it would seem that the story about John Jones has now been confirmed by no one other than Jones himself. So on Thursday, Jones confirmed on Twitter that the story is true, that he did indeed hide from a sample collector who came to his Jackson Wink MMA gym in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to administer a drug test for the Nevada State Athletic Commission. And this was apparently before the UFC's partnering with the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency in 2015. What do you guys think about this? I mean, this guy we've talked about several times guys who have gone through having drug and alcohol and abuse problems, addiction issues in their lives. And I know we all love the story of the guys who can find a way to overcome those things and to make something of themselves. But I also think it's interesting to look into the guys that can't do that for whatever reason. Like we touched on Antonio Brown and the Michael Thomas situation, and we're hoping Michael Thomas doesn't go down that same road. But when you look at these guys that have these problems, that clearly these guys have demons in their lives that they're dealing with, but yet for him to be the brightest star of a sport, like by far, and you just continually cannot get your personal life together, whether it be in you're being actually arrested, or you're having your belts taken from you, or any number of, at one point they thought he was going to get suspended for 10 years, which essentially would be a death knell on his career, because not many guys fight into their 40s. So I want to start with Paul, because I know you played sports as well, is just, what do you think when you hear that? Like what thoughts come to your mind when you hear that situation?
For me, it kind of depends on the substance. From my understanding, his stuff has been a lot of steroids.
It's been, so there was one time it was cocaine, to my understanding. Might have been multiple times it was cocaine. One time it was estrogen blockers, which is something that guys normally take after they take steroids. And then there was multiple times he tested positive for Turinabol, which is another steroid. With the Turinabol thing, and I'm glad you mentioned this, because I forgot to bring this up. When he tested positive for Turinabol, after that happened, he had a couple fights. I think it was a fight that happened, and then he popped hot again for Turinabol. And then the athletic commission came out and said that they thought that basically he could pop hot for that substance for the rest of his fighting career, and it would be okay, because they said that the drug would essentially pulse in and out of his system. And so therefore, if he would have a clean drug test and then he tested positive for it again, as long as it was Turinabol, they were going to let it go. So there's been so many little things along the way with this, and it's been several substances. It's not like it was just one thing or just steroids.
So when it comes to my personal opinions, I am of the opinion of, when it comes to drugs, legalize them, tax them, and then we're good. We don't have to worry about cartels. We have more tax money, which of course the government will find ways to misspend, but who cares about that? But when it comes to steroids and alcohol, that's where I have a much tougher time feeling any sympathy for anybody. I mean, steroids, you're doing that because you don't think you're good enough. And if you don't think you're good enough, you shouldn't be doing it. Or if you think you should be doing it, cool, just lose more often and just be honest about it. And when it comes to alcohol, like, you make a decision with every drink that you take, whether, I mean, I know once you get rolling a little bit and you're kind of drunk, drinks flow easily, but you actively make a decision every single day when you decide to have a drink. And I think the same thing is said for steroids. You're doing it. You know what you're doing. No sympathy here. In my mind, just kick him out of the sport. He's pretty much proven that he can't be trusted with any of it.
I think that's one of the things that is one of the big back and forths about it, because I feel like people now feel like that the UFC as a whole and the different anti-doping agencies are essentially covering for him at this point because of the fact that he's such a big pay-per-view draw, and everybody, like, he's one of the biggest names in the entire sport. So like, regardless of his foibles, they feel like that's going to be something that's going to make them money, which is kind of something I was interested in hearing your aspect towards it with that. And also just, I can't even imagine being the guy who did everything he was supposed to do in Daniel Cormier's part of things and doing everything by the book, shall we say. And then you find out time and time again how this other guy has gone through extreme lengths in some aspects to avoid doing those things. And also, I'm pretty sure Jackson Wink MMA are still an active trainer. I haven't watched UFC in a little while, so I could be wrong on that, but I'm fairly positive it's still an active camp. I mean, should they be allowed to continue to train fighters if they have been allowing one of the biggest names in the sport to skirt drug tests?
I think that's a couple different things. So I think if you want to get into the argument of doing everything that you're supposed to do versus doing things that you shouldn't, that's one. And then if you want to have the training, either the coach or the gym, depending on how it's working, allow them to go through and do it, it's hard to say no to money, especially when it's the kind of money that John Jones brings in. Who in the gym knew that they were hiding him? Like, was it the people running the gym? Was it his trainer specifically, or was it just like his friends of his that were always around?
They didn't say specifically what people. I can imagine why, but they obviously work for the gym. But that's really the most that we really know about it. I would imagine he's not going to implicate specific people in this.
Okay, so if it's people who work at the gym, then you either have to fire the people at the gym or you have to disqualify the gym and not let them train people anymore, because they're active participants. And I mean, at that point, guilt by association, you're an accessory to the crime. Like, it's time for you to go away. But if you want to take a look at it from the perspective of doing everything the so-called right way, I think that's a very slippery slope, because I mean, if you go through and do things the right way in a couple of states, then like marijuana can be used to help treat chronic pain and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And I mean, there's some places that don't want marijuana to be legal, but want synthetic marijuana to be legal. And if you have something that grows like a weed pretty much anywhere, people are going to get a hold of it if they want to. But on the flip side of that, let's say that you're training in Texas or Iowa, where marijuana is not allowed for anything. I think in Texas, there's one form of one specific disease that you're allowed to use it for, and that's it. So you're telling me that you think it's safer to trust something that has been 100% manufactured from opiates and then gone through all the pharma work to the point where every pharmaceutical company that was selling it is now having to pay to reverse and pay for all the treatments and everything. I don't think you can find a person in the world that would be able to convince me that that's safer than smoking something that grows naturally. So I think money is always going to be the controlling factor. I mean, it's why, even though Josh Gordon only got busted for pot, it's why he got so many chances, because he had talents and he could make people money. I just personally think that it's time for Jones to go away and they need to figure something out. If you have that many positive tests and that people saying it, like, okay, give me a reliable source that says that you're going to pop for this for the rest of your natural life. Like, give me someone who matters, not someone that you've used in-house or anything. Give me some independent doctors that have no skin in the game. But it's just an embarrassment at this point, because you've got people who, as you're saying, do things the right way, and then you've got people who will cheat, and do anything they can to not get caught. And those are the kind of people where I think the sport's better off without them.
Any thoughts on it, Ralph?
I think, Paul kind of hit on everything that I could even begin to say. I mean, you feel for guys that do it right. I mean, let's go back to baseball and, a team that did it right, like the Dodgers, and then they turn around and get to the World Series and get screwed over by a team that cheated. I mean, that's probably the biggest example I could probably equate it to. But, from my perspective, I agree with Paul on natural things versus man-made and chemically induced, from a drug perspective. But from an overall fairness perspective, I don't think it's not like you can just turn around and give those wins to Cormier or anything like that. And I'm coming from a very ignorant place when it comes to MMA, but from just a just a pure right versus wrong thing. Obviously it's wrong and he should be punished. And it's a shame that, like you said, Brandon, he's got such talent and it's wasted on lies and deceit.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that kind of goes hand in hand when you have like this unsurmountable God-given talent, and then how do you deal with everything that comes along with that in your life? I mean, we've seen people that have unfortunately, been lost to us because they just couldn't figure out their mental side of that. But yeah, I mean, I saw this story and I'm just thinking to myself, like, this guy is considered one of the baddest men on the planet. And he was hiding from people because he didn't want to take a drug test. And that to me just speaks leaps and bounds, I think. And I mean, I always hope that guys like that people like that can pull it together and can figure out how to, make it through life without having those things and impacting so many other people as clearly he has in so many situations there. And, but I think that's a pretty good place to leave it. And I want to thank you guys for showing up as always. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Definitely make sure you hit that like button. Definitely make sure you subscribe. Definitely let us know in the comments section what you liked, what you didn't like, what we could do better on. We'll definitely make sure that we get through all of those things. I don't think there's anything that I'm missing there. Do you guys have any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Nothing here.
Have a good week.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Muffed Punt podcast. Have a good one.
Take care.
It's my turn. It is. You told me it was my turn.
You can talk all that you want to, yell and scream, you lost.
It is my
You
turn.
lost the game. Take as long as you want, you still lost.